Now is that the reports of committees relevant to the health sector be noted. Simon O'Connor.
Absolutely delighted to take this call, Mr. Speaker. Look, the Health Committee has been working incredibly hard this year, including with the annual reviews, and can I start by thanking all the members on that committee right across the various political hue and spectrum. Again, a huge array of work. It's really in that spirit of thanks, though, that I want to focus a bit of my initial time in these 5 minutes. It is to actually those who are working hard within the health sector. So through the annual reviews, we've heard primarily from the DHBs, a representative number. We can't see all of them for obvious reasons, but in meeting with the various DHBs, those from the Health Research Council and other agencies, you realise and continue to appreciate the great work that they do. So I want to take this opportunity, rather than highlighting the particulars of their activities, just to say thank you to each and every person who works in those, in the health area. I was going to fall into the trap of talking about doctors, nurses and hospitals, but as everyone in this House will appreciate, it's much, much wider than that. And that came through in the Select Committee as the various board chairs, chief executives and others were talking to us and sharing what they do. So in a sense, on the record is to say thank you to them and all those working in the sector. Look, we heard a number of positive elements coming through in the Select Committee through the annual reviews. I'm going to leave much of that, Mr. Chair, to other speakers, both from the opposition and the government, to share. It's oft repeated, and I'm all for good news stories, but I'm not going to use my time there, bar one example, and that's what's coming out of the Health Research Council. They've got a new chair recently, Dr. Lester Levy, and a new chief executive in Professor Catherine McPherson, both of them doing a tremendous job. And one of the reasons I want to highlight what they do is often the HRC or the Research Council, Health Research Council, its work is not well known. Often it's the researchers themselves or other bodies which get the thanks. But actually the work and the monies through the Crown and invested via the HRC brings about amazing results. We heard about one example in the Select Committee. In fact, those of us who were at the Royal Society last night heard about this as well. It's some of the research that's being done and led by the likes, actually the Deputy Chair of the HRC Council, Professor Richard Beasley. Basically, it's looking at the efficacy of saline, in other words, water and salt, with other physiological products. In other words, can you make a product with all the other compounds and elements into a drip that may be more effective? Well, that's the use of, well, we couldn't use that if we don't want to offend the opposition. But the long and the short, the Research Council found that there is no greater efficacy or benefit, if you will, Mr. Chair, of using these new amazing products which may replicate human blood, plasmas and so forth. They found actually that saline in and of itself is just as effective. And saline costs effectively a couple of dollars, whereas these other physiological products cost hundreds of dollars. And here was a great example by HRC funding of some research which is saving not only New Zealand taxpayers, but people across the world, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, because ultimately we don't need to invest in these more expensive products because they're not bringing out the same set of results. So I thought it was just one small example, but a relatively positive example of what's happening in the health space. Look, we've heard from a number of other groups before the committee. They're highlighting in small ways the activities that are going on. One of the themes actually that was coming out, and I'm sure my colleague from New Zealand First will acknowledge, is the importance of oral health. It was something that is always coming before us, and I think it's one of the really strong announcements in recent days by Minister Coleman in particular, and obviously Minister Dunn, is actually looking to change where the decisions around the fluoridation of water occur, moving it out of local government and into DHBs, which makes absolute sense because actually this is a health issue, but I think that's a really good example of how actually voices in the community, voices heard through the annual review process, can begin to make a change. And I think it's just absolutely fantastic, and want to thank the Minister in the chair for his leadership in this role.
The Honourable